WADR. Promoting dialogue.
It's midday in Dakar, Monrovia and Banjul, 1 o'clock in Lagos. Good afternoon and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democrats Radio Broadcasting on 94.9 FM and around the world on WADR.org. Here is Newslink. Here are the top stories. Coalition of opposition parties and CSOs in Togo demands immediate resignation of Faure Gnassingbé.
Signatories solemnly and publicly asked for the immediate resignation of Mr. Faure Gnassingbé. He must give power to the Togolese people.
Senegal and Congo-Brazzaville deepen economic ties. Ghana's Registered Nurses and Midwives Association suspends strikes.
The Ghana Registered Nurses and Midwives Association's industrial action, initiated on 2nd June 2025, is hereby suspended, pending the outcome of the follow-up meeting scheduled for 26 June 2025.
And a court in Benin demand political activist Julian Kansu after his first hearing. Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
A pleasant welcome to our broadcast. Newslink opens in the Republic of Togo, where a coalition of opposition political parties and civil society organizations is demanding the resignation of Faure Gnassingbé, the president of the Council of Ministers. Known as the Framework for Reflection and Action for Change, the combination of political and CSOs actors held a press conference on Thursday in Lomé calling for civil disobedience in the country until Faure Gnassingbé steps down. They denounced the regime of Gnassingbé and his years of governance. Abdullahi Hassan has the details in the following report.
This framework brings together several leading opposition parties, including the ANC and the FDR, as well as the Togo Debut Citizens Front, a civil society organization in the country. They are calling for an end to Gnassingbé's regime in Togo and are denouncing his governance. Dojak Bevon, the president of FDR, is a member of the Framework for Reflection and Action for Change.
Signatories solemnly and publicly asked for the immediate resignation of Mr. Faure Gnassingbé. He must give power to the Togolese people, to whom national sovereignty belongs. This is not a symbolic appeal. This is political, moral and historical requirement dictated by common sense, by truth and by the agency to restore constitutional legality.
The opposition coalition is urging citizens of Togo to engage in civil disobedience as a pressure for Prime Minister Faure Gnassingbé to resign. Doji Akbevon argues that such actions will send a strong message demanding the resignation of the Prime Minister.
We solemnly call on the Togolese people to count from Monday, June 23, 2025, to hold on to the most sacred of their constitutional duties, to disobey and organize themselves to fill the illegitimate authority. These patriotic obligations will be fulfilled following the recommendations that will be the subject of communication in the coming days. Each sector of activity must prepare itself. Each citizen must commit to it.
Following a demonstration on June 6, organized by young people on social media, additional protests are scheduled for June 26, 27, and 28. The aim is to denounce the government and call for an end to Faure Gnassingbé's regime.
A report from WADR's correspondent in Lomé, Sylvie Wadrago, voiced by Abdullahi Hassan. In Benin, political activist Julian Kansu was taken into custody on Thursday, shortly after his hearing with the special prosecutor of the Creed. The activist from the main opposition party called the Democrats is facing prosecution for publishing false news and for electronic harassment. Christopher Atechu reports.
After being in custody since June 5, Julian Kansu was finally heard on Thursday by the special prosecutor of the Court for the Repression of Economic Crimes and Terrorism, CREAT. The hearing lasted about 10 minutes. Following the hearing, Julien Kande-Kansu, a member of the communications unit of the main opposition party, the Democrats, was placed in provisional detention at the Cotonou Civil Prison. Known for his highly critical statement about the current regime, Julien Kande-Kansu is being prosecuted for publishing false news and harassment by electronic means of communication. According to Reynald Agboja, one of his lawyers, he is accused in particular of having disseminated content criticizing the internet taxation policy in Benin. However, the date for Julien Kande-Kansu's trial has been set for July 1, 2025.
Christopher Atichu with the details of Aziz Adam Souley's report from Cotonou. Here in Senegal, former Minister of Mines Sophie Gladima is under investigation for the misappropriation of COVID-19 funds. On Wednesday, June 11th, she was questioned by the investigating commission of Senegal's High Court of Justice. Gladima is suspected of embezzling nearly 200 million CFA francs of public funds related to the management of the COVID-19 Force Fund, along with 4 other former ministers from former President Macky Sall's administration. Augustine Colley has the details.
The case revolves around 2 contracts awarded during Sophie Gladima's tenure as a minister. The first contract involved equipment that was allegedly delivered, while the second, more contentious contract was for the construction of a factory in Kédougou. Although a deposit was paid to secure the purchase, the land ultimately proved to be unavailable, resulting in the factory not being built. Anthony Mbengue, Sophie Gladima's lawyer, emphasized that there was no intention of embezzlement. He stated that the funds were not dissipated and are still traceable. Additionally, the lawyer noted that the service provider has offered to reimburse the amount. In the coming days, Sophie Gladima's defense team plans to file a request to lift the arrest warrant, arguing that the situation is a case of simple mismanagement. The investigating commission must now decide whether to dismiss the case or refer the matter to Senegal's High Court of Justice. As a reminder, 3 other former ministers have already been questioned, and only the hearing of Ismaila Madior Fall, the former Minister of Justice, remains to be held.
Augustine Colley filed that report. Meanwhile, Senegal and Congo-Brazzaville are enhancing economic cooperation across various sectors. The 2 countries have reactivated a joint committee that has been inactive since 2018. This development was highlighted during the first 5-day working visit of Congolese Prime Minister Anatole Colinet Mokoso to Dakar. Imo Edet completes the story.
Congolese Prime Minister Anatole Makosa's 5-day working visit to Dakar ends this Friday. After a working session on Thursday between the delegations, Dakar and Brazzaville have decided to create an ad hoc committee to deepen cooperation in the sectors of energy, education, the army and agriculture. Senegalese Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko explains more about the meeting.
We are very satisfied and confident that we can boost a new dynamic for this relationship between our 2 countries. This meeting will allow us to make Brazzaville and Dakar an example of cooperation and will allow us to boost the economies of our countries at a very high level. In this dynamic of intra-African cooperation, of strengthening intra-African exchanges.
Meanwhile, the Congolese Prime Minister welcomed the revitalization of cooperation with Senegal. Anatole Colinet Mokoso expressed Congo's firm commitment to sustain cooperation with the new Senegalese authorities.
We cannot guarantee the development of the continent if the level of intercontinental exchanges is so low. We must therefore work to further develop these exchanges. We must work to succeed in making small and medium-sized companies flourish in Senegal and the Congo. We have a lot to do. We have opened a number of avenues and we have faith that we will get there to succeed in this cooperation for a much more sustainable, much more suffering, much more resilient income.
This visit of a large Congolese delegation to Senegal is part of the priority African diplomacy advocated by the Senegalese government. Dakar advocates for strengthening cooperation with countries on the continent before external partners.
Imo Edet with that report.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Elsewhere in Liberia, President Joseph Boakai has urged his government officials to develop a performance-driven culture to achieve the nation's ambitious development goals. President Boakai highlighted the importance of accountability and efficiency in government operations. He made this statement on Thursday during a ceremony which marked the signing of performance contracts and recognition of high-performing ministries and agencies within his government. The Liberian leader also promised unannounced visits to various government entities to evaluate their contributions and effectiveness. President Joseph Boakai stated that establishing professional performance standards signifies a transformative approach to governance, fostering a more responsive and responsible government for the nation's betterment. Crossing over to Ghana, where the Minister for Communication, Digital Technology and Innovation, Samuel George, has urged the owners of radio stations that were ordered to shut down for violating the Electronic Communications Act of 2008 to take advantage of a 30-day grace period to get their affairs in order. Failure to do so could result in the loss of their license. On Thursday, the National Communication Authority (NCA) ordered over 62 radio stations to suspend operations due to regulatory breaches. In response, President John Mahama instructed the minister to work with the NCA to reinstate the affected stations in line with his commitment to free speech. However, minority members in Ghana's parliament criticized the president's intervention, stating that the decision is an overreach of authority. WDR's Nadidi Tete reports.
Addressing Parliament on Thursday, the Minister for Communication, Digital Technology and Innovation, Samuel Nati George, argued that the decision aims to enforce the law and not to fight free speech. The Ningo Prampram MP noted that penalties have been waived for the affected stations.
Those who fail to do so shall have their authorizations formally revoked under the law. Mr. Speaker, this is not the same as the arbitrary revocations and hefty fines imposed under the previous administration. As a current government, the ministry has also been instructed to waive all the applicable fines that should have been applied to the defaulting entities.
However, minority MPs led by their leader, Alexander Penyo-Marking, accused the government of targeting perceived NPP-aligned media houses for closure. He described the president's directive as an afterthought and merely for the optics.
You do not break it and pretend to be fixing it when it's not broken. You broke it. So if you are fixing, then you say we should commend you, we should be happy. Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, clemency is a belated thing.
In contrast, the majority MPs, through their leader, Mahama Yarga, lauded the action of the Ministry of Communication and the intervention of the President, pointing to how the previous administration abused the law and targeted certain media houses for closure, some of whom never recovered. The violations for which the stations were ordered to suspend the operations include operating with expired authorizations, failure to commence operations within the mandated time frame after receiving authorization, non-payment of required fees for provisional authorizations, and failure to meet the conditions necessary for final authorization. For WDR, Nadidi Tete, Accra.
Meanwhile, the Ghana Registered Nurses and Midwives Association, GRNMA, has suspended its nationwide strike following a tense standoff with the government over the implementation of their conditions of service. The decision came after a crucial engagement with the Parliamentary Select Committee on Health. Many patients across the country were left stranded at public hospitals as a result of the industrial action. Announcing the suspension at a press briefing in Accra, GRNMA President Perpetual Ofori Ampofo said the move was influenced by appeals from the public, patients, and the timely intervention of the committee. She also called on the government to demonstrate greater respect for nursing profession and to urgently address the welfare concerns of its members.
As nurses and midwives, we do not take delight in seeing our patients suffer. However, we cannot take good care of others when the system does not take good care of us. Considering all that has transpired from 2nd June 2025 in relation to the pleas of the good people of Ghana, pleas from our patients, and the timely intervention of the Parliamentary Select Committee on Health, the leadership of the association wishes to state as follows. The engagement held with the Parliamentary Select Committee on Health and other interested parties on Thursday, 12 June 2025, was very fruitful and has paved the way for an amicable resolution of the impasse with our employer concerning the implementation of our collective agreements. In view of point 1 above, the Ghana Registered Nurses and Midwives Association's industrial action initiated on 2nd June 2025 is hereby suspended, pending the outcome of the follow-up meeting scheduled for 26 June 2025. We call on our dear nurses and midwives to resume their normal shift duties from Saturday, 14th June 2025. And we wish to assure you that we will not rest on our oars until the collective agreement is fully implemented.
President of the Ghana Registered Nurses and Midwives Association, GRNMA, Perpetual Ofori Amofo. You are listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Here is a reminder of our top stories. Coalition of opposition parties and CSOs in Togo demands immediate resignation of Faure Gnassingbé. Senegal and Congo-Brazzaville deepen economic ties. Ghana's Registered Nurses and Midwives Association suspends nationwide strike. A court in Benin demands political activist Julian Kansu after his first hearing. Still ahead in the news, we also have a guest interview and sports news. Please stay with us.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
The Nigerian government on Thursday, June 12, celebrated over 2 decades of democratic governance, a day that gave birth to the new democratic regime in the country. During the ceremony, the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, George Akume, reaffirmed the country's commitment to democracy, especially in light of the recent resurgence of military coups across West and Central Africa. The struggle for June 12 was a pivotal moment in the nation's history, as millions of citizens from towns and villages took to the streets demanding democracy and just governance. From Abuja, WDR's Yashenu Sasetu reports.
In the past 5 years, the West African region has experienced over 10 coup attempts, starting with the military takeover in Mali in August 2020. Countries such as Burkina Faso, Guinea, Chad, and Niger have since faced similar disruptions. Despite this surge in military takeovers, Nigeria has maintained its democratic journey for 26 consecutive years. George Akume, the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, refers to Nigeria as a beacon of hope in a region struggling with instability. He made this statement while reflecting on the state of democracy across the continent in commemoration of Democracy Day.
Nigeria is powering forward in democratic rule. Even though we have not attained the democratic heights envisioned, we are confident that our path is straight and will lead us to a desired destination.
Akume took the opportunity to honor Nigeria's democracy heroes, those who fought, protested, and in some cases sacrificed their lives in pursuit of a civilian-led government. He emphasized that the contributions of these individuals should never be forgotten.
To all of them, we owe a debt of gratitude. We can only immortalize them by ensuring that we guide and guard our democracy, that we work to bring development to Nigeria. Democracy without development is empty and is bound to fail.
Meanwhile, Nigerian President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, in his address on Thursday, pledged to uphold the democratic rights of all citizens, particularly the freedom of speech. The president also conferred national honors on notable figures, including Nobel laureate Wole Soyinka and the Bishop of the Sokoto Diocese, Matthew Kuka, among others. For WADR, Yechini Sasetu in Abuja.
The Edward Francis Small Center for Rights and Justice, in partnership with a concerned Gambian accounting expert Noah Sise, have jointly submitted a request to the Ministry of Petroleum and Energy for information about oil and other mineral resources of the Gambia. The request comes amid concerns about the opacity and silence by the government of the Gambia regarding highly consequential activities in the extractive sector, specifically oil exploration in offshore blocks A2 and A5, and the apparent discovery of strategic mineral resources including kaolitic clay, plastic clay, and quartz sand. The Gambia has 6 oil blocks, that is A1, A2, A3, A4, A5, and A6, in which are located oil wells. The group says, despite substantial exploration activities and investment in offshore drilling by Far Oil and through Far Gambia Limited and its partner Petronas, culminating in the drilling of the Bamba 1 and Bamba 1ST1 well in the late 2021, there have been no formal communication by the government to the people of the Gambia. Oil shows were detected and up to 1.59 billion barrels of recoverable oil are estimated across 4 high-grade prospects: Panthora, Jato, Malo, and Jobo oil wells. To matters of conservation, the United Nations Ozone Conference comes to an end this Friday in France. Since Monday, various stakeholders have been discussing ozone conservation at this important event. In Nice, where the conference is taking place, West African fishermen have voiced concerns about the industrial overfishing of the coast of their countries, which has significant consequences for the ozone. Senegal in particular has long been affected by this issue. Mamadou Sarr, Secretary General of the fishing industry in Wakam region of Dakar, and Kaliba, an ozone campaigner at Greenpeace, are among those calling on the UN to implement strong measures to address the impacts of industrial overfishing.
The state of resource is what is causing problems in Senegal. In their jargon, they say overexploitation. There is a crucial lack of fish in Senegal. There is fish, but there is not enough for everyone. We must make a sustainable management to feed our populations. In the long term, the Senegalese will suffer from this lack of fish.
There are about 12 million Africans who depend directly or indirectly on fishing activities. Fish and all other marine resources and the source of basic protein, so you see how Africa is dependent on the activities of the ocean. Hence, the interest for the African continent to work on its preservation.
Mamadou Sarr and Kaliba are 2 fishermen from West Africa attending the UN Ozone Conference in France. West African fishermen hope that at the end of this United Nations Ozone Conference, strong resolution will be adopted to put an end to the plundering of fisheries resources of the African coast.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is The Guest.
Crossing back to Ghana, where the Minister of Communication, Digital Technology and Innovation, Samuel George, has ordered the owners of radio stations that were ordered to shut down for violating the Electronic Communications Act of 2008 to take advantage of a 30-day grace period to get their affairs in order. Failure to do so could result in the loss of their license. On Thursday, the National Communication Authority (NCA) ordered over 62 radio stations to suspend operations due to regulatory breaches. In response, President Mahama instructed the minister to work with the NCA to reinstate the affected stations in line with his commitment to free speech. However, minority members in Ghana's parliament criticized the president's intervention, stating that the decision is an overreach of authority. Our guest is Cecil Mills, president of the Ghana Independent Broadcasters Association.
GIBA's position, as you know, GIBA is an association of private broadcasters in Ghana. Much as we do stand strongly for protection of the media interests, especially of the private owners, both the media houses and their staff. The reasons for these closure are not directly media infringements, but in this case, it's a bit unique in our current circumstances that most of the stations that were listed, some as far back as 2023, had not met their financial obligations.
In your case, how is JIBA supporting its member stations that are affected during this 30-day grace period? And what challenges are stations facing in trying to meet the regulatory requirement?
Okay, so what we did in the first phase, we actually reached out to our members. And let me do a caveat here. Our association does not necessarily cover all the stations. We have close to 700 radio stations in this country. Our membership is over 350. What we do is we actually make sure compliance is one of the things that we do in make sure that our stations are compliant, not just in terms of meeting the regulators' requirements in terms of things to do with copyright. We've got things to do with taxation, tax compliance, etc. So as part of that, we actually regularly did. But when this happened, we actually wrote out to our members and we did ask them that had anybody received a letter from the regulator, which is the National Communications Authority, should reach out to us so we can look specifically at what the issues are and see how we can chart the path. A couple of stations did reach out to us, and there were various. In fact, all the stations that did reach out to us, none of them have been affected in this closure, those who reached out to us. So for our members, we have done that. In this sweep yesterday, we also reached out again that in case anybody missed out on the first one, they should reach out to us. As of this morning, nobody has. There were 2 members who called, but currently they are on air. But for one member, it was just one more inspection that was due. And I think that has been resolved.
What reforms or changes would JIBA like to see in regulatory framework to better balance compliance enforcement with the protection of press freedom in Ghana?
So we actually have found out that over the years that we have a number of laws somewhere where actually constitute, and the different laws, some sitting within the realm of the NCA regulation. We've got the Electronic Communications Act. We've got the National Media Commission Act. We've got these separate laws that are subservient to the main constitutional law that actually gives me the media protection. But however, you would agree with me that over the years, there has been a very significant change of what we call media. There's new media. There's been lots of changes in terms of platforms. We're using analog single station broadcast where people are transmitting on their own. Now we have a DTT platform. And we have a record of even fighting where we believe that the use of change of technology was being used to infringe on possible media freedom rights. We actually have been to court on such issues and have won some cases. We have fought off the NMC in terms of bringing a law that seemed to bring censorship. But we realize that instead of fighting these single laws that some may be with age and time in bits, we need a modernized broadcast law for Ghana. So we have been working on a broadcasting bill, which will actually converge. And you see, that bill contains quite a bit. Even in a case where this time we had the president reach out and give clemency, and finally it was decided to give a 30-day moratorium for people to remedy their thing. What if we had a president who did not give a 30-day? What would be the situation today? Some stations may be going to court or the communications tribunal to see if they can get some clemency, even though, yes, you can be foul of the law, but maybe based on the gravity, you can have a bit of an opening. So we need to get the broadcasting bill through. We need the National Media Commission and the NCA to work together, because if the two regulators sit separately and this one works in its own chamber and not in line with this, we need to bring the two together. And that is one of the major things that we are trying to do with the broadcasting bill.
And of course, that is our guest for today, Cecil Mills, President of the Ghana Independent Broadcasters Association. And in sport, it's officially set for the 2025 Basketball Africa League Finals. It will be Libya's Al Ahly of Tripoli squaring off against Angola's Pedro Luanda this Saturday, June 14 at the Sun Beach Arena in Pretoria, South Africa. We have come to the end of this edition of Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Mustafa Sek and Seconde for the technical assistance. Do interact with us via our social media platforms, X and Instagram at WADR English, and on Facebook, WADR English Service. By 1 p.m., Mustafa Jakite will bring you the comprehensive news in French, which is Info Chevo. I am Sankule Janko. Good afternoon.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 104.3 FM, New Me FM.